Okay, this is going to be a real quick, sloppy, unedited video of how I take off these outside panels on a Smart ForTwo 453. This is a 2016. Anything that's that new body type should be the same kind of instructions. So, the first thing you got to do is you got to take off this panel here. There's a little torque screw. Everything's going to be Torx. I think I used from 15 to 40. So there's a whole bunch of different sizes here. There's a little screw right here. Take that out. This slides up and you can take it off. Inside you're going to have your wiring harness for your tweeter. You're going to have a wiring harness for your electric mirrors if you got them. Under here, you're going to have to take the mirror off. There's a screw, and one screw that's kind of up here tucked underneath some weather stripping. So this one screw right here, take it out, pull this off. Inside this, there'll be 3 screws in a triangle shape. Take those off, unplug the wiring harness for the mirror. The mirror will come out. Be careful it doesn't fall off because it's kind of weird and awkward. So once that's off, you're pretty much done up here. What you got to do also is you got to take this quarter panel off in order to slide the outside panel forward enough to get it off the lips of the door frame. The manual says to take the bumper off and to take the quarter panel off. I don't take the quarter panel off. There are 3 screws right here on the quarter panel, 1, 2, and 3. There is a screw under this guy. So what you want to do is take that plastic replaceable rivet out. So pop the middle out and then pop the whole rivet out. And then this plastic thing just comes off with some tabs. There'll be a fender screw right here, a big white looking zinc one. Take that one out. And then there'll be another one right down here. That one, take that one out. This one right here, take that one out. Once that's out, you can lift this quarter panel up. You'll have to pick the lip up and over, and then you can pull this, swing this whole thing out. Where the blinker is, the whole thing comes out. Now, the reason you got to do that is because inside here, there is a black plastic bracket. Let's see, you can kind of see it from this angle. Right there, behind the wiring harness. So here's the wiring harness for the door. Right behind there is a black plastic mount that holds the fenders. There's a bolt on that. Once you get this fender bent out away from the car, you can go in here and you can loosen a bolt. I think it's a 10mm bolt. You can loosen that and let the bracket swing down. Once the bracket swings down, there's enough room for you to take this panel, push it forward. The 3 tabs up here are going to unlock, and then you can pull the whole panel off. But we're not quite done yet. So you got to remove this corner. You got to remove the mirror. You got to remove the fender, or get the fender out of the way and loosen the bracket that's by the blinker. You've also got to remove the handle. So the easiest way to do that is that there's a Torx in here. It's a really long wormy screw. You gotta undo that guy. And you gotta undo this guy. So undo those 2 screws. And then you can pull this to the rear like this. Just pull it that way and it should pop out. There's 3 plastic tongues that lock to the front. So you undo those screws, you pull this to the rear, this will pop out. When this pops out, you'll have most of your panel exposed, but there's 1 panel screw located right here, which is why you got to take your mirror off to get to it. It's a small Torx with a metal sleeve on it. It's the only looking screw in the whole process to get that off. So you take off this corner panel, you take off the mirror, you expose the screw for the panel. You got to take off your door handle, move it that way, then you can get your panel. The way you move your panel again is you got three posts on the inside of this plastic that go in and lock to the rear. So you've got to push the panel in and push it to the front to get these panels to unlock. There's a clip back here that you can lift up, and that's the only thing that secures this. Everything else is a lip. Everything else is a lip This is part of the lip right here. So this lip will come back and over, and then you'll be able to get your panel off. There's no other screws that need to be done here. All the other screws that you see in here, all the other plastic tabs, these are for the inside panel, which I'm going to try to avoid doing. And the whole point of this is to get to the speaker, because I need to replace the speaker. So I think that covers all of the parts about getting this panel off. All right, so we're just now getting started here with the fender disassembly, at least partial disassembly. So you got 3 of these, 1, 2, and 3. These are the only screws that are up in this area. You're gonna have to take this weather panel off this corner here. It goes like this. You have to take this off to get to that one screw. Then we gotta take this part off. So sometimes I like showing these types of things so you know what you're prying on so you don't break it. Looks like it comes straight out. So you got this guy, you gotta pry the center part off, then you can pull the whole thing out. That's right here in the back of this panel, like this. And then this guy comes right out, and then here is one of your screws that you gotta undo to get this panel off. And his buddy is down here. So we're gonna do both of these, and that should get us to be able to bend this panel away from the body. All right, fender screws are removed. I've got the door closed just so I can work around it. Might have to open it up in a second here. Everything so far has been a T27. So these fender screws have all been a T27. What we gotta do is, we gotta lift this panel up and over the lip on here so that we can get this to swing out a little bit. So I'm gonna do that real quick. I'm probably gonna need both hands and probably the door open for this. I think the easiest place to start is down here on the bottom. Usually we can get this to pop out pretty easy. Now on the driver's side, oh, there's a fender pin in there. On the driver's side, the FM antenna is right here. So we might have to do a little funny business to get around this. So we got this lifted up. It's away. And now you should be able to see that bracket. Yeah, it's right there. I can't really see it too well with my angle here. That bracket is right there. It's easier to come at it from the top once you pull this fender away more. And it's a 10 millimeter hex that you can undo. All I had to do was give it a couple twists and that bracket dropped down, like it swung down. And when it swings down like that, you've got enough room to take the panel off. All right, so here is the really crappy FM antenna on the Smart ForTwo 2016. So it's driver's side right above the wheel. And that right there is the fender bracket. So you can kind of see where that blue tongue slides in there to lock that fender in place. I don't think I'm going to be able to get you a good angle of where that bolt is. There it is. Right underneath that looks like a wiring harness or grounding strap. There's that little guy right there. So loosen him a little bit, and then that big plastic hunk of bracket will swing down. You should have enough room to get this door panel forward. Alrighty, so you can see now that that bracket, whoop, hold on. Let's go from up here. All right, so that bracket has changed orientation now. And we've got a lot more play here to mess with our front door panel. So I opted for a 10 millimeter socket with an extender to get in there a little easier. Working around the antenna is a little bit more difficult in the driver's side. This is left-hand drive US ForTwo. Passenger side is a little easier to work with because you can get your whole arm in there and work it with a wrench. But you might need a socket for the side. Okay, we're going to take off the side mirror now. There's that one tiny torque screw right here you take off, and then you can lift this guy up and out. Get him up and out and out of the way. This is your tweeter wiring harness if you've got tweeters installed. This is the connector for your mirror. So here's one screw, and then there's one behind here. Right in this little gap here, you gotta get something that kind of reaches in there for it. There it is. So those three, and then this will come off. Then you want to make sure that you undo your harness connector and push it through the hole so you can take the whole mirror assembly off. Okay, so the mirror's off now, and you can see that I pulled this grommet out so I can get better access to that screw. 3 screws, and then there's probably like a retainer tab in there, something that took a little bit of oomph to get the mirror off. But you can see now that here is the panel screw. This is the one screw that keeps the panel in place, and that's why you got to take the mirror off, is because you got to get to this before you take the panel off. Now we're going to work on taking the door handle off. All right, so this part might be the easiest part of the disassembly here. You got the long worm screw that goes into this hole. Take that guy all the way out. You've got this one with a collar on it. Oh, it's not really a collar, it's more just a fitting. That guy comes out of here. These are the 2 screws that fit your door handle to your door frame. And then you grab your door handle and pull straight to the back, and it'll pop out because it's got these little plastic tabs. And then I usually just leave this dangle. It's not a huge deal. And now, I think we're ready to take the panel off. Oh, we gotta take that screw off at the front, and then we'll be ready. The manual says to push it to the, to the front? The tabs lock to the front. I'll figure it out when I take it off, and I'll update the video. I think we gotta pull it back first, or pull it front first, and then you gotta lift it off. And it kind of swings out from the bottom. I'm pretty sure we can take this off too. You can take this off if you want. It makes it easier for you to see the tabs that you're working with. You don't want to break those off because then your panel won't get back on. They got to slide forward, and then they'll pop out of their holes. If you do take off the weather stripping, interestingly, the instructions in the service manual say that you need to slide this weather stripping back on this channel from the rear all the way to the front before you put it on. This weather stripping isn't the kind that you just press on. This one goes through a channel. You could rip it off because it's rubber, but when you want to put it back on here, it's got this dual channel here that you want to make sure you slide it back on this way, all the way to the front. All right, so I'm taking this part a little slower because I want to make sure I give it good detail. When I'm doing these types of things, I always want to know where the rivets are so I know where to pull and pry and I'm not breaking anything. So if you see here, the screw's out and the panel's probably about 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch forward. And I've already unlocked the pins in here. So there's one, and there's the groove that it goes into. Here's one. Here's the channel that it pops into, and then it locks to the rear. And I think these are about like every 8 inches or so. Here's one. So he goes into this channel and he locks the rear. You can see where the plastic's been wearing. This is also what you have to do. This is a pop and lock. So he goes into this channel, locks the rear, and then there's a clip that goes back on this side. This guy right here. He's just a clip. He's pretty easy to bend back and clip onto this piece of metal once you're done. And that's basically it. So when this is loose, you've just got some clips and some lips connecting this door to the door frame. So you want to push this the rest of the way forward to get this part off. It'll kind of sound scary. It'll fall down a little bit, and then you should be able to pull everything back and get it off the rear lip here, because this lip here on the door panel is actually pretty deep. It's like 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch. It's pretty deep right here. So to the forward for about 1/4 of an inch, unlock these guys so that your panel kind of starts coming off, and then jiggle it the rest of the way up and down and try to get this thing off nice and easy. There's no more retaining pins. Once these guys are out, everything's just weather stripping lip. So, okay, now that the front panel is off, I want to show you why we've got to mess with this fender. So, you can see right here that my bracket, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more. This bracket that I loosened puts too much, creates not enough gap for the panel to wiggle. So there's a lip here that this front part of the panel needs to cup. It's oddly shaped. It's, you know, your wiring harness comes in around here. So there's this gap for the wiring harness. I struggled really bad with my passenger door trying to get this back on because this lip here hung up on some weather stripping and I couldn't get the panel back far enough to go over the rear lip. So when you're doing this and you're reassembling, make sure that when you slide this back in, first of all, make sure that you loosen that bracket or you're never going to get this panel off, because I tried and there's no way to short cheat the system. You got to get that bracket out of the way. You don't have to take the panel all the way off, but you got to get that bracket out of the way. You get this guy in to the front, make sure that he's around the lips of that weather stripping. Once it's cupped in there nice and neat, you can look at it from the inside to make sure that these lips are all on the outside. None of these lips go on the inside of the door. So these all go on the outside, and the inside panel slips inside here. Then it's pretty easy to pull back and get around the rear lip. So lessons learned. Be careful with those lips. Make sure the plastic's not snagging or hanging up everywhere, and you definitely need to get that bracket moved. All right, so I'm playing with this idea here now. The service manual says to take the inside panel off. The inside panel is a bit difficult to deal with because there's lots of clips, there's a handful of screws, there's lots of wires and mechanisms you got to unhook. You got to unhook and remove this part of the wiring harness, these brads. There's a wiring harness clip right here that you got to unclip. And then there's a wiring harness here for the window motor you got to unclip and pass through. Then you got to do a bunch of screws on the other side. You got to remove the door handle. That's pretty difficult. It's not very pleasant. And the whole reason that you got to do all that stuff according to the manual is that the speaker is right here. You can see the driver. So there's the driver. The harness for the speaker is down there at the bottom. You can see that little white, let's see if I can zoom in. That little white tab right there is where the wiring harness for the speaker clicks into. And then there's a screw. There's a screw on the opposite side. And there's a screw at the very top to keep this thing in. It's screwed to the back side of the inside panel, which makes this not pleasant or fun. So the Evolution website says to muck around with the window raising brackets because you've got to move some of the stuff out of the way to get to the speaker. And I'm pretty concerned about doing that because this screw looks like the one you'd want to mess with, and it looks like it's factory set to be a certain distance away from the track. So this is what guides the track of the window. So when the window goes up and down, it's going along this track and these pulleys and cables. And I really don't want to touch that because I don't want my window twisting if I don't get this back where it's supposed to. I could probably mark this with a Sharpie or something, so I'm pretty close to where it is when it comes back. Taking some photos, yeah, sure, maybe. But since I know what this looks like, and I know where things are already, I'm gonna try to work through this sound foam, this insulation, see if I can do this and bring the speaker out. I might not be able to get my new speaker in, which could be a problem, but we'll see how this works. All right, so after much deliberation and playing around with this from the outside panel rather than from the inside panel, I decided that I went with the solution that was hinted at by the Evolution UK website. So I don't own a subscription to it anymore, so I don't know what the actual instructions are. So if you own one, great, go ahead and do it. What I did, I removed this wiring harness so I could get a little bit more play in this foam. And then I got my Sharpie out, put a Sharpie mark where I know my middle of my bolt needs to be. It looks like you can kind of see where it's at. And I'm guessing if I'm a couple millimeters off either direction, I'm not going to hurt this window too much. So that shouldn't be too much of a nightmare. You do get like an extra inch of play on this bracket now. And with that, I can move some more foam around and I can get to the speaker and that third screw that's down here. Now the speaker should just come out, and here's the clip. I'm going to do this with two hands later, but I'll rip this out in just a second. All right, speaker's out. So wiring harness, the tab is on the inside of the car, so you got to get your finger around there. You can get your finger on there to pull it out. Out this pops. Here's your pin. I 3D printed a new bracket for my new speakers, so I'm gonna go get that. What I do is I destroy this. I get this pin out, or I get this female socket adapter for the speaker. I solder the tabs into my new speaker, put this through my bracket, and then I've got a bracket that pops back into the OEM settings and uses the same fitting, so I don't have to solder anything in the car or crimp or anything like that. So we're off to the shop to do some soldering and some retrofitting with some 3D printed parts. All right, so once you've got the connector out of the original harness, it's glued in there with like this epoxy stuff that's pretty gnarly to undo, so I typically destroy the original ring to get that sorted. But this is the 3D printed adapter. It's made to press fit this guy in here, so it's got these little tabs. Should be, I'm not sure if I can do this one-handed, but we'll try to get this in here, show you how it works. So, in there, and I'll be impressed if I can do this one-handed. There we go, clip, just like that. Alrighty, so there are our leads, and we're ready to put our speaker in. I got these from Amazon for 50% off. They're 80 watt or 60 watt with 100 watt peak power. The ones that come in the Smart ForTwo from the factory are 40 watt, 4 ohm impedance, in case anybody is looking for something. 4 ohm impedance, 80 watt, or 40 watt 4 ohm impedance. I got these 60 watt ones that are 3 ohm impedance, which from my speaker research doesn't seem to be a huge issue. I'm a big JBL fan. I think they're a good balance of price. I really love my Sony cans. So if you're looking for a really nice pair of Sony cans, you really can't go wrong with a high-end pair of Sonys. But these guys have got tweeters that point up, so they're kind of optimized for floor or low-mounted door speakers, which is what you're dealing with in a smart car. Like where these are mounted on the inside panel, they're about as far down and forward as you can really fit them. So I saw these and thought, hey, that might be nice. Since I'm not planning on putting the JBL tweeters by the side mirrors, getting these that point up a little better might be nice. So you can see this has got the 4 screw holes on the speaker. I'm gonna try to do this without breaking my speaker. These are GTO-629s, and they sound pretty decent. And if you can't tell, there's a lot of mass behind these speakers compared to the old ones. They do fit, and my bracket is the same height and specifications as the original. So we put this guy in here like this, and we screw it up. We'll flip them over, and then we'll solder our stuff on the leads. I like soldering on my bench. I do not like soldering in a vehicle. You can accidentally melt wiring harnesses and a whole bunch of other stuff if you're not careful. So I 3D printed this. I'm assembling the unit here so that we can take it back into the garage once it's done, and all we have to do is put the 3 screws in and clip the harness in here, and we'll have a functioning speaker again. All right, so we got our JBL GT-629 installed in the bracket. The 4 screws go in there pretty easily. This is a 6.5 inch. I think it said it'll fit as low as 6 1/4. It was actually too big for the original bracket that we had to destroy. So if you're going to do another speaker that's got these 4-hole orientation, this bracket should probably work for you. So we've got our harness in here. We've got our wires soldered. Everything's ready to go. We're going to pop it in. We're going to plug it in and make sure that it sounds off, because last thing we want to do is put this thing all back together and have a loose wire or a bad joint. But you can see there's quite a bit of mass at the back of the speaker, and I haven't had any problems yet, but we'll see how things turn out. Oh, and I don't think I mentioned this, but you want the tweeters facing up. So the tweeters face up, and up is this topmost bracket. It's on the opposite side of the wiring harness connector. So wiring harness connector is the bottom. This top screw is the very top, and you want those tweeters pointed up. I was playing with the idea of canting the speaker 45 degrees so that you could actually point it up towards your face more, so that it was going towards the, instead of just pointing up, it's pointing more towards the driver. But doing that started messing with the way these cables were wired, and I didn't want to mess too much with the orientation of where this went or how much wires I had to put in there. So I did bend these leads down a little bit to give me some more room for soldering. You just get some needle nose pliers and bend them once. They're not a big deal. You got to make sure that those are on okay. You don't want them touching the speaker or getting too close. All right, let's hook it up. All right, so I'll mention this too while we're at it before I overlook it and forget to mention it. There is a tongue in here. You can see this plastic tongue right here. This is some sort of brace for the wiring harness. This does not work with my 3D printed adapter. So if you're going to use my 3D printed adapter and not the original one, you're going to need to get some pliers in here and snap this off. It's really flimsy. In fact, there goes one tab right there. And I can probably, yeah, so just tab this off and pull it out, and then you'll be ready to fit. This is the only modification I had to do to the rest of the vehicle to get these speakers in. I didn't have to cut any wires, didn't have to solder anything into the car itself or its wiring. Everything was done at the speaker level, and this is the only thing I've had to mess with to get this whole thing to work. So we've got, you want to be careful putting this back in, because if you don't have that collar in right, some weird things happen. You don't want to screw up the membrane on your speaker. So be careful putting that back in through this little hole. You kind of need to put it in and rotate it. And then don't forget to put your bracket back on. Move this stuff back. Redo your wiring harness that you may have taken off. And then you just put it back together the way you took it apart. Nothing fancy. The panel's probably gonna be the hardest part. Remember to get that lip around the panel and then push these guys in and slide it back. The holes on the panel should match here. But I think the speakers turned out pretty nice.
Tell me what's been happening, what's been on your mind. Lately you've been searching for a darker place to hide. That's alright. But if you carry on abusing, you'll be robbed from us. I refuse to lose another friend to drugs. Just come home. Don't let go.
That's it. Good luck.